Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to come before you to introduce to you Jay Wilkinson and to share a little bit of information about him before he comes up here and speaks and share with you this evening. Jay Wilkinson, an All-American football player for Duke University and the son of Bud Wilkinson, an American legend and Hall of Fame football coach. After graduating from Duke University, where he majored in political science and minored in religion, Wilkinson earned a degree from the Episcopal Theological School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He is the recipient of the U.S. Conference of Majors Distinguished Service Award and the National Collegiate Athletic Association Silver Anniversary Award. He's also the author of a compelling book. It's called Dear Jay, Love, Dad, Bud Wilkinson's Letters to His Son, which it's an inspiring account of what it takes to win, to be successful, and to serve others. The timeless values that his father, Bud Wilkinson, espoused in his letters to his son. Dear Jay, love, Dad. So please join me right now in welcoming Jay Wilkinson to speak.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much, Steve, for that very kind introduction. It's so nice for me to be with you all this evening. Steve mentioned the book that my father, the letters that he had written to me. And, you know, growing up in my home in Norman, Oklahoma, it was really an exciting time because my dad's teams were generally winning. They had a lot of success. They won 47 straight games in a row, for example, which today is still an all-time NCAA record more than 55 years later. And as a result of that great success, many of the coaches from around the country would travel to Norman, Oklahoma, to observe spring football practice, to find out how they were doing things at Oklahoma. And on one occasion, Coach Woody Hayes, the renowned coach of the Ohio State University, came to our home, and he learned that my older brother Pat was co-valedictorian of his high school class. Well, Coach Hayes had a deep reverence and a respect for education. So the first thing he did when he returned to his home in Columbus, Ohio, was to go into his son Steve's room to demand, "Why can't you make straight A's in school like Coach Wilkinson's oldest son, Pat?" To which his son Steve replied, "Dad, I'll start making straight A's in school when you win 47 straight games in a row." True story. I went to theological school up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and during that time I was a graduate assistant at Boston University for 2 years. And the head football coach asked me if I would assist in recruiting players, and I said, "Sure, Coach, I'd be happy to do that, but tell me a little bit about what kind of athletes are you looking for to recruit?" And he said to me, "Well, Jay, look at it this way. You're out on the field and a player gets knocked down, but he jumps up and he gets back up on his feet. And a few minutes later, another player gets knocked down, but he jumps up and he's ready to go again. And then a few minutes later, a third player gets knocked down, but once again, he gets up on his feet." And I interrupted the coach and I said, "Now I know exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for that athlete who's got great determination and great heart and tenacity and can overcome adversity." He said, "No, Jay, we're not looking for that kind of player. We're looking for the guy that's knocking everybody down." Another true story. Well, it's such a pleasure, as I mentioned, for me to be here this evening with my wife, Rita. As Steve mentioned, I authored a book earlier this year, and it was about 3 years ago that I was asked to deliver a keynote address to commemorate a room named in my dad's honor. And during that talk, I read part of a letter that he had written to me in graduate school to convey new insights and perspectives about him. I had never done that before. I'd never read a letter during a talk. And it was very well received. So following that talk, I decided to go back and to determine what had my dad left with me that was really important. Because as I studied the contents of the letters, I realized they had remarkable insights into themes as relevant and as vital and as important today as when they were written 50 years ago. I knew the times obviously have changed. But I asked myself, what lessons concerning leadership and communication and parenting and positive reinforcement and values did my father share with me that I could pass along to others? And that's when I decided to write the book. And this evening I'd like to share with you just a little bit of the background about what happened after I decided to write the book, and then secondly to share with you some of the themes and the principles in these letters. Because I know that they are very relevant to all of us, regardless of whatever profession we're in, and certainly as students today for each of you, I hope that they will be useful to you in your own personal growth and development. After I decided to write the book, the first question I had was, what publishing house should I take my manuscript to? And my father was very well known, not only in the state of Oklahoma, but nationally. He was known as a great football coach, and he was also on color television for quite some time as a color commentator. And so I thought that it would be useful to take it to the University of Oklahoma Press, because that would give it an identity with where my father coached football for 17 years. I quickly learned that the University of Oklahoma Press is one of the finest publishing houses in the country. But they would be the first to tell you they're one of the most bureaucratic organizations, because you had to take the manuscript through various committees, not only committees within their publishing house, but faculty committees as well. And each of them had to approve it. And then you had to have 2 readers who read the manuscript. And if anybody didn't like it, they could kill the book. So that process took about, probably 9 months to go through. Then after they approved it, of course, they were very helpful to me in the manuscript itself. It went through probably 20 different revisions. And when I gave it to them, I thought, this is going to be so perfect, they're really going to like it. Well, I felt like I was in 11th grade high school English class, because it was returned to me with all kinds of suggestions and recommendations and misspellings and grammar mistakes that I'd made. But they were extremely helpful to me in the final outcome of the book. The next decision I had to make was how to organize the book. There are various themes, which I'll share with you in just a moment, such as preparation and such as determination and the will to win. And I knew that I could organize the book by those various themes, and then I could incorporate the letters under those headings. I decided, though, that perhaps a preferable way to do it was to construct what I call a real-time narrative. There are approximately 50 letters in this book, and they're written over a period of 1960 to 1966. During the time that I was in college and then in graduate school. There were a lot of letters that were lost, but the reader can gain a continuity, I think, and an understanding of what was going on in my life and in my father's life by just reading through the chronology over that 6-year period. The letters are filled with love and with encouragement and support of a parent to a child. As I continued to reflect on the letters, I realized that there were 4 core principles that seemed to reappear and resurface more frequently than others. And those were the principles of values and attitude and preparation and perseverance. For example, consider the following quotes. Regarding values, my father wrote, "The ability to push yourself to be the very best when you really don't feel much like it is perhaps the greatest value you receive from playing the game." I know that that applies to each of you because you're taking on a lot of responsibility here as students. You've got a lot of demands. And sometimes you don't really necessarily are always going to feel like being the very best that you can. But as he said, one of the most important values. He said the greatest value is to push yourself when you really don't feel much like it. A second principle that he wrote in a letter was about attitude. And he wrote, in your association with any group, your attitude is the key. What can I contribute to the group? Not what can I take from it? And again, I think in your lives here at this remarkable junior college, you're being able to think not only of yourselves, but of your classmates and of your professors, teachers, the faculty. Gives you a whole different perspective of looking at things. A third principle that comes through frequently is preparation. And my father wrote, don't set your sights low. Follow your fondest star, but make practical plans on how you will reach it. And he was also famously known for a phrase that he continually talked to his players about. And that was, the will to prepare is more important than the will to win. The will to prepare is more important than the will to win. Why is that so? Well, you guys know on examination day, everybody wants to do really well. You want to score as well as you possibly can. And he knew as a coach that on game day, everybody wanted to win. At that time, the fans were in the stadium, the flags were flying, cheerleaders were on the field, the band was playing, everybody was filled with great excitement and awe. But he knew that what was done long before an event taking place, and then diligently preparing for the future, brought about a consistency of success. And then finally, a fourth principle that shines through in the letters is perseverance. And in a letter he wrote, making a determined all-out effort and still falling short can strengthen a young person beyond any single occurrence, if he can learn to go forward again with even greater determination to get the best out of himself in the most trying of circumstances. In other words, he knew that we don't always succeed first time round. But what's really important is to be able to come back with even greater determination whenever there are any setbacks or disappointments. Well, as I continued to reflect on the letters, I realized that there were other themes that also resurfaced, maybe not as much as the four core principles that I just alluded to, but they were basic themes in the letters that I would like to share with you for the remainder of my talk. And the first was the will to win. During each football season, when my father's team was assembled, before any of the practices, he always began that first team meeting with a question to his players. And that question was, how good do you want to be? How good do you want to be? He would always follow that question up with the same response. It's up to you. It's up to you. And then he'd go on and tell his players that he and the other assistant coaches were there to put them through various drills and fundamentals to improve their speed and their quickness and their reaction to movement. But in the final analysis, they'd be only as good as they made up their minds to be. And the same, of course, holds true with each of you as students. You wouldn't be here tonight, you wouldn't be enrolled if you didn't have a will to win, to be the very best you could be. And it's a very important ingredient going forward in your lives, to continually have that desire to win. A second theme that shines through in the letters frequently is integrity. We all know that integrity starts first with our being honest with ourselves before we can reach out to others with proper moral conduct. And when I was in high school, our father provided my older brother Pat and me with a framed poem which we each hung in our rooms, which really, I think, crystallizes the theme of integrity. And the poem is called "The Man in the Glass." And it goes like this. When you get what you want in your struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your mother or father or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. You may be like Jack Horner and chisel a plum and think you're a wonderful guy. But the man in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. He's the fellow to please. Never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass. But your final reward will be heartaches and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. My father later expanded his thoughts when I was in graduate school on this theme when he wrote, "There has rarely been a time in history when mankind was so in need of moral, religious, and political leadership. The three terms moral, religious, and political are so intertwined that they're inseparable in the sense that I use the words. What you are learning now will be a resource for the future and the foundation upon which your contributions to life and to God will be based." Integrity is so very important, knowing that you're a person that can be dependable, reliable. People can count on you, always telling the truth. Integrity is a very key component in everything that you'll be doing, both here as students and in your later life. A third theme that comes through the letters frequently is selflessness. And I feel that my father summarized his success as a coach in only 2 sentences when he wrote, "In a limited way, I was able through my coaching to achieve a momentary selflessness on the part of our team. When we played well, it was because the cause transcended individual recognition or honor." In other words, with the great athletes that he had, these young men with such great talent, he was able to convince them that by subordinating their own egos for the good of the team, that they would enjoy a greater consistency of success. And of course, that turned out to be true. In one letter to me, he defined the qualities that make a man. And you might think as a football coach that he might be thinking of a gridiron gladiator. You know, a muscular guy, real tough, goes out and knocks people down. No. In this letter, he told me that the qualities that make a man are character, kindness, and thoughtfulness, and a spirit of service to others. That's what he felt were the qualities that made a man. And I think, again, in your time as students here, that carrying through the theme of selflessness will be so valuable and so important to you throughout your entire lifetimes. A fourth theme that comes through the letters frequently is goal setting. In one letter, my father wrote, "Many people, in fact, the majority of people, react to events. They never cause things to happen. Only by defining your goals, planning how to achieve them, and preparing properly are you able to cause things to happen your way instead of reacting to events stimulated by others. It's a matter of riding with the tides and the currents as opposed to setting sail and steering your own course." In other words, he knew that goal setting is not just throwing a dart to a blackboard. Your goals, understandably, will be to achieve the finest grades that you can while you're here in school. But to do that, it's more than setting that goal. It also includes the thoughtful process of knowing how you're going to do that and then preparing properly. Many years ago, I had an opportunity to run for the United States Congress. I returned to my home in Oklahoma. And I was running in a district that was 90% registered Democrats, 10% registered Republicans. And I was running as a Republican. So we knew that it was going to be an uphill fight and that we couldn't make any mistakes or we'd probably lose. Well, I hired an out-of-state advertising agency to create our television commercials. And one of them was a 30-second spot. I was walking through a cow pasture. You could see cattle in the background. And there was quiet music. And I was walking and I was looking up very thoughtfully, very reflectively. And then all of a sudden an announcer's voice came over and it said, "Jay Wilkinson gives all he's got and more." And that was the extent of the ad. Well, my opponent, who was a 24-year term incumbent, Tom Steed, was very clever. And he poked fun at me with that ad, and he said, "You know, I might not be as smart as that young whippersnapper Wilkinson, but I got enough common sense to know when I walk through a cow pasture, I better be looking down on the ground to be sure I don't step in anything, rather than being looking up in the sky." Well, it's a true story. And while we can laugh about it tonight, what it taught me is that we really hadn't prepared as well for that ad. Our goal was to create the finest commercials we could, but we had not vetted that ad out. We didn't really take the time to prepare. So in goal setting, always remember, while you're here and later, that setting the goal is incredibly important, but equally important is planning how you're going to achieve it and then to prepare very properly for it. Another theme that comes through frequently in the letters is determination. My father always knew that determination and motivation were essential. And with regard to motivation, he always felt that either to be motivated or to motivate other people, you had to have two factors at play. You had to have discipline and you had to have respect. You had to have discipline and you had to have respect. And of course that's very true to your school. The relationship you have with your faculty, with the administration, and their relationship to you. There was a coach from the University of Michigan whose name was Bo Schembechler. He coached a while back, and during his tenure, the University of Michigan won several Rose Bowls and several Big Ten championships. During one season, the team started out on a rather negative note. They lost 2 of their first 3 games. And so on a Sunday afternoon, the coach assembled his assistant coaches to meet and to try to talk about what they could do better to improve the team and what was perhaps going wrong. And one of the assistants said, "I think we got a morale problem." And the coach said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I've been hearing some of our players say it's no fun playing ball here and making negative, disparaging comments about our program." And the coach said, "Well, what are our captains saying about this?" And he said, "Coach, I heard one of the captains saying it himself." He said, "You what?" He said, "Get him into my office immediately." Within 30 minutes, this young man was sitting across the table from the head coach, Bo. His name was Andy Canavino, and Andy was the captain of the defense. And the coach said, "Andy, I hear you've been saying some things. I hear you've been saying it's no fun playing football at Michigan. We practice too long, we hit too hard, we're in too many meetings. Did you ever say any of those things, Andy?" He said, "Yeah, I did, Coach." He said, "Andy, you represent me as the captain on and off the field. How in the world can we have a successful team if you, the leader, are saying negative, disparaging things about our program? Do you know what I'd like to do to you? I'd like to stand you up in front of every player who has worn the blue and gold and come out of the tunnel in front of 100,000 screaming fans representing our great academic institution. And I'd like you to tell them it's no fun playing football at Michigan. We practice too long. We hit too hard. We're in too many meetings." Do you know what they'd say to you? They'd say, "You're a lousy leader, Andy Canavino." Andy got up out of his chair, tears in his eyes, and he said, "I think I know what you mean, Coach." And then the coach said, from the time he left my office, I can honestly say that he became the finest captain that I ever had at Michigan. He said he was a captain of our defense. And for 3.5 games, nobody crossed our goal line. We went on to win the Big Ten. We won the Rose Bowl. We had a great season. And the coach said it was his fault. He said until Andy Canavino, the leader of the team, knew and understood what was expected of him, that he could not provide that type of leadership. And the coach says any organization that does not work on motivation every day is doomed to failure. Motivation, so critically important. My junior year at Duke, during the midpoint of the season, I was exhausted from practice. We did a lot of physical contact, a lot of running, and I wrote my dad to complain. I knew he shortened the practices during the season to keep his players refreshed, and I also knew that they didn't have any physical contact, and he wrote back to me and he said, "The greatest training I know is for any young man to be in some sort of disagreement with the procedures of his superiors and still perform with total loyalty and devotion. The discipline of disagreeing in your own mind and still being able to perform to your utmost ability is one of the great lessons that we all need to learn." Here you're part of a very large school. You as students can't obviously agree with every directive that comes down from the administration and the faculty, but you can speak openly, and then as students, of course, you're expected to get into line and to follow those instructions, and you'll find that will be very true throughout your lives. And to do it, it means that we motivate ourselves and that we try to motivate others. I spoke just a second ago about determination. We all know that we might have the most positive attitudes, believing that things are going to work out, but life, as we know, is filled with great challenges and sometimes tragedies and disappointments, heartaches and setbacks. And during that time, we either have to simplistically say we're just going to step back and withdraw, or to somehow muster up the strength and the courage and the grace to hang in there and to be strong. My father was always very impressed with a quote from former President Teddy Roosevelt, which really crystallizes the whole theme of determination. And this quote is called "The Critic Who Counts," and it goes like this: "It is not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong man stumbled or how the doer of deeds might have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred with sweat and dust and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who, if he wins, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." You're challenged. You're carrying key loads in your work course here and what you're doing outside of the curriculum. I would hope that you'd give yourselves credit for being in the arena, for showing up, and to give yourselves that credit and the pat on the back. Another poem that my dad really felt crystallized the whole theme of determination is called "The Race" by D.H. Goldberg. And it goes like this: "Quit. Give up. You're beaten. They shout at me and plead. There's just too much against you now. This time you can't succeed. And as I start to hang my head in front of failure's face, my downward fall is broken by the memory of a race, and hope refills my weakened will as I recall that scene. For just the memory of that race rejuvenates my being." A children's race, young boys, young men, how I remember well. Excitement? Sure. But also fear. It wasn't hard to tell. They all lined up so full of hope, each thought to win the race, or tie for first, or if not that, at least take second place. And fathers watched from off the side, each cheering for his son, and each boy hoped to show his dad that he would be the one. The whistle blew, and off they went with hearts and hopes afire. To win and be the hero there was each young boy's desire. And one boy in particular, whose dad was in the crowd, was running near the lead and thought, "My dad will be so proud." But as they sped across the field and crossed a shallow dip, the little boy who hoped to win lost his legs and slipped. Trying hard to catch himself, his arms flew out to brace. Amidst the laughter in the crowd, he fell flat on his face. But as he fell, his dad stood up and showed his anxious face, to which said to the boy, "Get up and win the race." He quickly rose, no damage done, behind a bit that's all. He ran with all his mind and might to make up for the fall. So anxious to restore himself, to catch up and to win. His mind ran faster than his legs. He slipped and fell again. He wished then he had quit before with only one disgrace. "I'm hopeless as a runner now, I shouldn't try to race." But in the laughing crowd he searched and found his father's face, that steady look which said again, "Get up and win the race." So up he rose to run again, 10 yards behind the last. If I'm to gain those yards, he thought, I've got to run real fast. Exerting everything he had, he made back 8 or 10. But trying so hard to catch the lead, he slipped and fell again. Defeat. He lay there silently. A tear fell from his eye. I'm hopeless as a runner now. 3 strikes I'm out. Why try? The will to rise had disappeared. All hope had fled away. So far behind, so error-prone, a loser all the way. Get up, an echo sounded low. Get up and take your place. You were not meant for failure here. Get up and win the race. With borrowed will, get up, it said. You haven't lost it all. For winning is no more than this, to rise each time you fall. So up he rose to run again, and with a new commit. He vowed that win or lose, at least he wouldn't quit. So far behind the others now, the most he'd ever been, still he gave it all he had and ran as though to win. 3 times he'd fallen stumbling. 3 times he rose again. Too far behind to catch the lead, he still ran to the end. They cheered the winning runner when he crossed the line first place. Head high, proud and happy, no falling, no disgrace. But when the fallen youngster crossed the line last place, the crowd gave him the bigger cheer for finishing the race. And to his dad he sadly said, I didn't do too well. To me, you won, his father said. You rose each time you fell. And now when life seems dark and difficult to face, the memory of that little boy helps me in my race. For all of life is like that race, with ups and downs and all. And all you have to do again is rise each time you fall. Quit. Give up. You're beaten. They still shout in my face. But another voice within me says, get up and win the race. So determination again. Very key. You're going to have ups. You're going to have downs. And yet I think the most meaningful part of that poem is the relationship between the Father and the Son. Somebody who's caring for the Son, and he certainly knows and understands that. And the final theme that I would leave with you all this evening is faith. My father always felt that our country's faith in God was a key ingredient in our nation's growth and the development. And he never felt that it mattered necessarily what religion you were part of, but that our relationship with the spiritual presence gave us a greater power and a greater energy than perhaps we could muster on our own. And he also knew that faith really strengthened the bonds between those we love. And on one occasion when I was in graduate school and I was saying goodbye to my mom and dad, they were living in Washington, D.C. at the time. It was a rather sad departure. And my father wrote a letter and said, "When you left today, I knew exactly how you felt. And I felt precisely the same way." Any leaving of the physical presence of those we love is a shock momentarily. There is a poem, Mizpah, which states this reality well. I don't have my reference books with me, so I can't quote it in its entirety, but your grandmother has it framed, hanging on her bedroom wall. A line from the poem, which is its theme, says, "Only a thin veil hangs between the pathways where we are." This is true, for I feel you are always with me, and I hope you know how I am always with you. Well, the poem to which my dad referred is actually the Mizpah benediction of Genesis, written by Julia Baker, and I'd like to close just by reciting just a few excerpts from that poem. It goes, "Go thou thy way, and I go mine, apart yet not afar. Only a thin veil hangs between the pathways where we are. And God, keep watch between thee and me, this is my prayer. He looks thy way, he looketh mine, and keeps us near. I sigh sometimes to see thy face, but since this may not be, I'll leave thee to the care of him who cares for thee and me. And though our paths be separate, and thy way is not mine, yet coming to the mercy seat, my soul will meet with thine. And God, keep watch between thee and me, I'll whisper there. He blesseth thee, he blesseth me, and in this we are near." So faith was the last ingredient I would share with you this evening from these letters. As I mentioned earlier, I hope that these principles and themes, the importance of values and attitude and preparation and perseverance, and then adding to that the will to win, integrity, selflessness, goal setting, motivation, determination, and faith will be useful to you during your very important years here as students, and then to carry on with your lives as you leave. I think the main purpose of my being motivated to write the book was I hoped that it might inspire others to take the time to put down in writing their thoughts of love and warmth and encouragement and support. And so that would mean to me, to each of you, would be to your parents and your siblings and aunt and uncle, grandparents, faculty, other students that you're close to. Because that energy and power that you receive from people that you know are concerned about you and your well-being is terribly important, and it will carry on to your lives long after you leave here. It's just been a great privilege for me to be part of this great symposium, and I'll be real happy now, Dean, to answer any questions that any of you might have about the book or anything at all. Please fire away.
You feel like those sanctions?
Yes, sir, and you're talking about Penn State?
Yeah, Penn State.
Yes, sir. The question.
As a football person and being familiar with football, do you feel like the sanctions were adequate, or do you think they were rather light? And do you feel like what happened there is endemic of football programs around the country?
Yes, very good question. I'll I'll try to respond to the last question that you asked. I do not think that the behavior of Coach Sandusky is representative at all of college football throughout the country. I think it was very shocking to all of us, just indefensible what the heinous crimes and behavior from the coach to young, defenseless boys. I think we all know that as we hear more and more, there are a lot of similarities, I think, between that conduct and perhaps some of the priests in the Roman Catholic Church, where that behavior was covered up, as we know, for a very long time. But I think this was an anomaly. I was stunned because I've been around football for a long time, and this is much different than the issue of being gay, as we know. This was actually being a perpetrator going against defenseless young men. So I think it was obviously just unacceptable behavior. With regard to the sanctions, 2 or 3 things. I felt that they were appropriate with one condition. I personally did not think it was fair to the players who had gone to practice and had participated in these games during all these years to have the games won and losses, or the victories, taken away from them. I have personally a hard time accepting that. I think the monetary financial penalties seem to be very severe, but I would say probably very appropriate. So other than the taking away of the victories from what I would call the players, I felt that they handled it very well. The last thing I'd say is that part of why it was so shocking to us was Coach Paterno seemed to run a very good program. He emphasized the importance of graduation, getting degrees, but again, the behavior was just absolutely shocking, and I'd say totally unacceptable.